Welcome back to Hot Takes and Deep Dives. This is Jess, and I am here with the co-creator and star of the CBS sitcom. It's going into its third season, Hearts Abishola. She's a featured correspondent on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, and how I first discovered her was through her multiple stand-up specials on Netflix. She just came out with her very own memoir called Cack-Handed. Please welcome Gina Yashere. Hey, Gina.
Well, hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Very good.
Very good. Just, I let's first start with the television show that you star on, and then I really want to get into your life and your stories and stuff. So,
okay,
explain this to me. You were discovered initially as a consultant because Chuck Lorre, he is the infamous creator of 2.5 Men, of The Big Bang Theory. So he was creating a show about a show that starred a Nigerian woman and was creating their love story. And what's the deal? He sat around with his 2 other writers and was like, we're 3 middle-aged white guys. We can't write this thing. We need to find a female black creator or comedian. How did this work?
Well, basically, Chuck went on a trip and he went all through Africa and he met loads of beautiful African people. And he was like, I want to include them in my next show. And he was making another show with Billy Gardell of Mike and Molly. And he was like, well, I don't want to make another Mike and Molly. I want the female protagonist to be an African woman or a Nigerian woman. But he was like, well, we can't do this by ourselves. We're 3 white guys. We can't do this. And he was like, we need to find a Nigerian female comedian who can help us create this show. And basically they did a Google search. And that's how they found me. A clip of me doing stand-up in London with my mum in the crowd, and my mum just stood up and the whole audience went crazy. And they were like, get this woman here.
That was your appearance on, wasn't that at the Apollo, live at the Apollo in London?
Yeah, but it's the Hammersmith Apollo in London, yeah. So that was the show. I was on that and my mum was in the crowd. I did a whole routine about my mum. And that was the set that they found. In fact, Al and Eddie found the set. Chuck didn't find it. Chuck was like, I don't know if we're going to find a Nigerian female comedian to help us with this thing. This might be crazy. And he'd sort of gone away, mulled on the idea, and then come back and was like, I don't know if this is going to work. We're never going to find a Nigerian female comedian. But in the meantime, Al and Eddie had found that set of mine and they had it on pause. And they literally just turned the laptop around and pressed play and went, what about this woman? And Chuck watched my set and laughed and went, yes, get her here. And I was living in New York at the time.
Okay, so now what happens? Literally walk me through this. Do you get an email at that point, or are you contacted through your manager?
I get a call from my agent saying, Chuck Lorre wants to meet you. And I'm like, Chuck Lorre? Who is that? I have no idea because I'm useless and an idiot. And my agent was like, go Google him and call me back. My agent was very cool. Go Google him, call me back. So I Google him and I go, oh shit, that Chuck Lorre. Okay. So I call back and I go, okay, I'd love to meet him. So they're going to fly me over to LA for this meeting. And my agent goes, yes. And I go, well, I've just come on a long tour and I promised my missus that I was not going anywhere for at least a month. So if they're going to fly me for this meeting, they're going to have to fly me first class because I'm tired of shit. And my agent was like, well, no, it's a meeting with Warner Brothers. They don't fly people first class for a meeting. They're going to fly you coach. But listen, this is Chuck Lorre. If you have to cycle there, you will cycle there. And I was like, I will not. And furthermore, you told me to Google Chuck Lorre, and I did. And he is very rich. And so is Warner Brothers. So they can afford a first class ticket. So please go back and get me a first class ticket. So my agent is very exasperated at the point. But I'm a person, I know my worth. I'm like, you know what? I'm tired. We're going to make this, we're going to do this in a way that I'm happy. So my agent goes away and comes back and he goes, fine, they're flying you first class. So I fly first class from New York to Los Angeles, and I go into a room with Chuck Lorre, Eddie Gorodetsky, Al Higgins. And basically I walk in, they go, tell us about yourself. So I sort of tell them about myself. And they go, okay, so this is the thing. Chuck says, I want to make this show with Billy Gardell. We want a Nigerian woman to play opposite him. So I'm like, oh, so do you want me to play the role? And Chuck looks at me and goes, not necessarily. So in my head, I'm like, what the fuck am I doing here? Why am I here? But he goes, but we're 3 white guys. We can't write this. We need a consultant of sorts. So in my head, I'm like, you want me to consult on all things African. So in my head, my hair's already stood up and I'm like already getting angry. But I'm like, no, I'm in the room. Let me hear them out. So they go, we need a consultant to help us write, for the African characters and whatever to help us. I was like, okay, fine. And I go, so how did you find me? They tell me on Google. So I'm like, ugh, Google, really? So you don't know any of the stuff that I've done before. You had no idea what my previous achievements are. You just Googled and just brought me over. That is the epitome of white privilege there. You can just fly me across the country, first class, on a whim. And I'm like, okay. So, that was I'm very polite in the meeting. I'm going, okay, very interesting. I'll talk to my agent about it. I leave the room, I call my agent and I go, absolutely fucking not. I'm not doing this. This is ridiculous. It sounds exploitative. I've had my ideas stolen in the past. I do not like this at all. No, thank you. But my brother, who is a big fan of Big Bang, and my best friend in London, they called me up and screamed at me simultaneously, going, look, you've been complaining about the lack of opportunities for black women in this industry. Here's a chance to work with the king of sitcoms and make a show about Nigerians, and you're about to pass up this opportunity. And I go, after many hours of them screaming at me, I go, maybe you're right. So I'd been flown over for this meeting. I'd flown over on Sunday night. The meeting was on a Monday. I was planning to fly back on the Tuesday. So I was like, fine, I'll stay and consult with them. Once I get in a room with them, I actually really like them. I fall in love with Chuck and the guys. And I go, you know what? These guys are serious. They really want to make a good show. Because I had all these demands. I was like, if we're going to make this show, it's got to be authentic. I've got to have a hand in the casting and make sure this is done properly, because I'm not putting my name to anything that's going to denigrate my culture. So as long as you're willing to listen. And they're like, yep, fine. So I couldn't help myself. I'm a comedian. I started creating the characters, because I've been doing a lot of these characters in my stand-up for years. So I started creating the characters, going, this is what they're going to be called, this is what they're going to do, this is what the story's going to be. And I based a lot of the story on stories out of my own life, like Abishola's story of her coming over with her husband and her husband going back to Nigeria because he couldn't get work as a civil engineer. That is my parents' story. My parents met and had us in England. My dad was a qualified lawyer. England super racist in the 60s. He couldn't get, in the 60s and 70s, he couldn't get a job as a lawyer. He went back to night. So I based all these stories. So after a couple of days, I'm supposed to have flown back on the Tuesday. I ended up staying for 3.5 weeks, making 2 days worth of underwear last 3.5 weeks, because I stayed in the room and helped them write this pilot. And 2 days in, they'd called my agent and said, all right, forget the consultant thing. We need her to help us make this show. So we're going to bump her up to producer and co-creator. So I stayed in the room and helped him write this pilot. And obviously, as a comedian, my dream has always been to be the best friend in someone else's sitcom. So I wrote myself in as the best friend. And the rest is history.
It's unbelievable. I mean, are you just like, I can't believe, I mean, are you still shocked at this story? Because this now was going on like three-ish years ago. The show has been on the air for 2 full seasons, and it was just renewed for a third season. It's like the #1 show on CBS. Like, are you just like, how did this happen?
Yeah, I mean, look, the universe works in crazy ways. If it looks like it was just random luck, but it's not. I've been out here hustling for 25 years and doing my best stand-up and putting my material online. So it was all there for them to find. So
yeah, they weren't. Yeah, yes, yes, exactly. You laid all the groundwork for them to eventually do the Google search, and boom, you had that special already done.
Exactly. So, yeah, the universe works in crazy ways. All these things were coming together, and it's like everything just clicked into place at the same time, and it was fortuitous.
Now, I absolutely loved your book. So I want to get into some stories, some things that I learned about you from the book. So you grew up in the UK. You've been living in the United States now for like the past 13 or so years. But your idol, your hero growing up in the UK was Downtown Julie Brown from MTV, the VJ. And
I loved her.
Was she your hero? Well, tell me if I'm right here. Was she your hero because she too made it out of, she's from Wales, made it out of Wales and became an MTV celebrity? And that sort of was your goal, to become a Hollywood person?
Yeah, it was my dream. From childhood, I'd always wanted to live in America. As a kid, I thought you guys had better toys, better candies. Every TV show was you kids frolicking to the beach, hanging out with Brad and Chad and solving crimes on your cool bicycles. So from childhood, I wanted to be in Different Strokes or the Cosby Family. I wanted to be in America. And even when I grew up and became an engineer, I worked for an American company because my thing was, I'm going to go work for an American company, become a good engineer, and then transfer to work in America as an engineer. So that had always been my dream. So once I got, once I was watching MTV and I was into the music scene and the dancing, and I saw Downtown Julie Brown on MTV in America. And I was like, oh my God, that she is living my dream. She's in America as a Black British woman, and she's made it, and she's hosting TV shows on American TV. That would be my dream. So yeah, she was my hero. I've never met her.
Oh, I can't believe you haven't met her at this point.
Never met her.
You got to find her.
Yeah.
Now, you talk about, well, first of all, you just mentioned that you were working as an engineer. It is wild. So you worked for Otis, which, I mean, I have an Otis elevator in my building. I live in Manhattan, so of course I have an elevator. And it is, of course, an Otis elevator. So you were repairing elevators as an engineer. This seems very difficult. Like, were you a science person?
I studied electrical, so I studied physics, maths, A levels, and then I studied, my degree was in electrical electronics engineering, so that's what I studied. So yeah, it was difficult. It was a great job. I loved it. I loved learning. I hated the people because I was the first female engineer that Otis had in their UK history, which sounds amazing, but it was awful because I was surrounded by all these white dudes and I was constantly sexually and racially abused every day. I'd come into work and there were pictures of monkeys above my overalls. They'd stuck banana skins in my pocket. This is the kind of stuff that I was up against. Because I'm working on a construction site. There's no HR. There's no one to say, what you're doing is wrong. We're on a construction site.
And so at the same time, were you also pursuing comedy? Like, at what point? So you're doing this as your day job, working as an electrical engineer. Was it also your dream? It was obviously your dream to make it to the United States and to California, but did you also want to be a comedian? Like, at what point?
Nope. I'd always use comedy at school to deflect from confrontation. So I got into too many fights at schools, fighting bullies and getting into trouble. So I started to use comedy as a way to deflect away from a confrontation. But I never saw that as a living. The people who did it on TV were just the people on TV. They were a different class of person. I never considered that I could be one of those. I was happy.
Who did you love? Like, who were your favorite comedians that you saw as a kid?
That's the thing. I never watched comedy per se. Like, there was some silly sketch stuff on TV that I really liked. There was a guy called Kenny Everett who I loved as a kid. I don't think he made it across the pond to America, but if you go look at Kenny Everett's sketches on YouTube, he was hilarious. So I loved him. But I was not a fan of comedy per se. I'm not one of those comedians who's got an encyclopedic knowledge of comedy and watched everything from Mom's Mabley up to, I didn't, I just didn't. It just wasn't on my vision board. It just wasn't there. But I was working as an engineer and I was happily working as an engineer. I hated the people, but I loved the job. And because I loved America so much, I wanted to move to America. I wanted to move to America and be an engineer in America. The comedy thing didn't come till later, after I left my job. So after I left Otis, I wasn't getting the promotions I was supposed to get because I was the first woman. They didn't know what to do with me. So even though I was getting the qualification, getting the experience that I'm supposed to get that certain promotion to be running my own site, they were like, the men, I don't think the men are going to listen to you, so we can't promote you. So I was like, well, that is discrimination. So I tried to take them to a grievance hearing, and my union that I'd been paying into for 4 years, my union rep refused to represent me. He was like, I don't know about all this women's lib stuff, so sorry. And I had to go to this grievance hearing with the top brass of the company, unrepresented by my union. Obviously, I lost. It was this 21-year-old black girl against 4 60, 70-year-old white dudes who ran the company. They were like, we don't believe you. Sorry, bye. So after that, I was like, I got to get out of this company. I don't want to be here anymore. And the building industry went through a little bit of a slump in the mid-90s. They were laying people off. They were never going to lay me off because I was the diversity picture on all their brochures. But I stormed into my manager's office and I was like, lay me off. I want out. or else I'll go public with everything that I suffered at this company. So they paid me my money and I left. And I was like, this was in the summer. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to spend the summer enjoying myself, hanging out. And I'll go and get another engineering job in the winter because there was an abundance of engineering jobs at the time. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do all the things that I've always wanted to do. You know, I remember a teacher at school saying to my mum, you know, your daughter's really funny and she should be an entertainer or an actor. And I remember my mum looking at this teacher and going, yes, she can act like a doctor when she becomes a doctor. And that was the end of the discussion. That was the end of it. But I was like, well, let me try this thing that everybody says I should do. And so I started getting into performance. I did background on a play. I was a background actor in a play. I didn't say anything or do anything. I was just in the background, but I loved it. And then I was a member of an organization that was doing fundraisers and stuff. And I wrote what I thought was a play to perform. And it turned out this play was a comedy sketch. And that's how I got into performing. And from there, I kind of parlayed into stand-up comedy. And I was like, well, I'll do this for fun because this is great. I'll throw everything I have at it and do it for as long as possible. And then when it all runs out, I'll go back to work as an engineer. Well, that was 25 years ago.
Insane. Now, you write about your very first trip to the United States. And unfortunately, that first trip was to you and your friends picked the destination of Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Yeah.
Tell me about this trip. You basically had the rude awakening that it's all just strip malls and going to the movies.
Yeah, I had no idea. You know, I'm like, America is the Mecca. This is where we all want to go. We didn't know how big America was and how different the different states are. And my friend had an aunt who lived there. So we were like, great, free accommodation. We can just fly out there and stay at her aunt's house and her house. And we got there and we were amazed. We're like, oh my God, this is amazing. The sun is shining all the time. It's beautiful. You know, coming from England,
yeah,
where it's just great. I was like, oh my God, the sun is shining and her aunt has a waterbed and a pool. This is amazing.
There's nothing more 90s than a waterbed.
Oh man, we were so impressed by this waterbed. I'd never seen a waterbed before. So I was like, she has a waterbed and a pool. Oh my God, we are living the dream. That was for the first 4 days. And then after that, we're like, what else is there to do? And there was nothing else. We'd go out for walks and people driving by would be looking at us like we're crazy. Why are they walking out in this 100-degree sun? And yeah, all we did was go to the mall and go to the movies. And we booked to stay there for 3 weeks. After 5 days, we're like, oh my God, Fort Lauderdale is so boring. We got to get out. I want to go where the music videos are shot. I want to go where downtown Julie Brown is. We need to go to New York. So we changed our flights and left early and went to New York.
I love it. You also say on that Fort Lauderdale, on that trip, because you were so bored in Florida, that because this was like the year was 1990, you saw Ghost 3 times in the theater.
Oh, yeah. We loved that film.
And then later on this trip to New York, you actually ran into the actor who murders Patrick Swayze in Ghost.
Yeah. How crazy is that?
Well, that's New York City, baby.
It was amazing. So yeah, we saw Ghost 3 times, loved the movie. Also saw Chucky. There was another film.
Problem Child, I think you said.
Problem Child with Gilbert Gottfried. So we saw that too, because that was all around the same time, all around 1990. And then we went to New York and we were hanging out in a park. I think it was Washington Square Park. And we saw these guys stand. Now, bearing in mind, I was still an engineer when I first went to America. I didn't know what stand-up comedy was. And there were these guys in the park telling stories and people were surrounding them and laughing. And we stood and watched. And the first guy was this black dude and he was hilarious. And then he went, okay, now I'm going to bring out my friend. And then his friend came out and I was like, holy shit. That's the guy I just watched him on a movie the other day. He's the guy that killed Patrick Swayze. Yeah, and he was a stand-up comic. Who knew?
Oh, wow, he was?
Yeah, he was a stand-up comic.
Oh, that's amazing.
He was doing stand-up in the park. They were there doing stand-up.
And what else did you guys do on that trip? I mean, I know you write about how you went to McDonald's like every day because you realized that in New York or in America, McDonald's bakes their apple pies instead of frying them like in England. Amazing. And that like blew your mind.
They were the best apple pies I'd ever had in my life.
So you ate at McDonald's, and what else did you do? You said how you had heard of Delancey Street and Canal Street because they had been mentioned in rap songs and interviews
Yes.
with rappers. So
Yes.
that was on on the itinerary. That was on the destination list.
Yes. We wanted to go to where all the rappers talked about and get the cool clothes. Because a lot of the stuff back in the 90s, it took 6 months to a year for American fashion to get to England. Even movies, when we saw Ghost, it didn't come out in England until 6 months later. So we felt like we were time travelers. So we're like, let's go Delancey, let's go Canal, let's get all the gold dookie chains, let's get the leather bomber jackets, let's get the Kangos, the Reebok pumps, the Adidas shell toes, and come back to England looking like superstars. So in New York, we spent most of the day eating McDonald's and shopping. And then at night, trying to find all the cool nightclubs that we'd seen in the rap videos and stuff and on MTV.
And I'm dying. And so like you were going out to the club. So at that time, this was before I was still living. I'm a New Yorker, but I was way too young. I wasn't living in the city. But at the time, I know that the Meatpacking district, I mean, it was like a hellhole. Like back in the day, it was like really bad. And but that is where all the clubs were. And you talk about you discovered a club called Mars.
Yeah.
Tell me about this night that you had.
So we discovered this club. So when we were at McDonald's, we met all these cool young kids who used to hang out at McDonald's on Broadway. And they were like, yeah, Mars is the place to go. You've got to go to Mars. So we just went one night, and the club was open every night. And I remember it was over several floors. So one floor was a house floor. One floor was a hip hop floor. I can't remember what the other floor is. And we went one night and we danced all night, and we had such a good time. We were just flitting between the different floors and checking out the different music. And I was practicing all my dance moves that I'd been practicing on, that I'd, recorded off of MTV. I used to record Yo MTV raps on VHS, and I used to play them back and all the Running Man dances and all that, and the Cabbage Patch. I learned all the dances. So I was, going up against these Americans to see if I could dance as well as them. And then we went and we were like, let's go back again tomorrow. So we went back another night, and it was different. It was gay night. Same cool music, but we're like, wow, there's a lot of girls that look like boys and a lot of boys that look like girls. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was a gay night. And at the time, I was not aware of my own sexuality. So I thought, well, we're going to go to the club because it's a great club. So what we'll do, we'll pretend to be gay so we can fit in. So, there was 5 of us girls. We all sort of paired up and held hands, and we pretended to be gay and went into this club and hung out. And that's where I had my first lesbian kiss. Because this girl came up to me and she was like, you're a lesbian girl. You don't even know it. And then she took me into a bathroom and kissed me, and I was like, holy shit, I'm a lesbian.
Are you serious? I mean,
serious. That truly happened. She came up to me, she started chatting me up, and I was like, hey, I'm from England, I'm not gay. And she was like, and she looked at my outfit, and I had like shaved head, dreads on top, baggy jeans. And she looked me up and down. I was like, no, this is how we all dress in England. This is just how we dress. It's not a gay thing. This is how we dress. And she's like, whatever. You're a lesbian girl. You just don't know it. And I was like, whatever. But we were chatting and having a laugh. And then she was like, I'm going to the bathroom. Follow me. And I was like, okay. Obviously, the American girls need company when they go for a pee. Okay. And I followed her into the bathroom. And she basically just pulled me into a cubicle and tongue kissed me in the cubicle. And I was like, holy shit, I'm a lesbian.
And then what happened? And then then what happened?
Nothing, basically. We went our separate ways. I went back to my friends and pretended like it had never happened. She gave me her phone number. I tried to call her a couple of times. She never picked up the phone. I think she lived with her parents or something. I never saw her again, but I never forgot her.
Wow. And then were your parents, was your mom accepting, when you eventually, how is the gay stuff received in Nigerian culture?
Not great. We are illegal. We are very illegal in Nigeria, and they will raid a party where they think gay people are gathering and imprison everybody and flog people sometimes. Public floggings.
Now in 2021?
Yeah, right now in 2020. And also there's laws in Nigeria whereby if you know a member of your family is gay and you do not out them, you can also be punished. So it's a very, very Yeah, just an awful attitude to gayness. And the thing is that we weren't like that before white missionaries came with their Bibles and told us it was a sin. Africans didn't care about sexuality back then. It was all about spirituality. But we got corrupted by the missionaries, and it's, we've clung on to that. And generations later, we don't even remember where we got these ridiculous opinions from. But yeah. So my coming out to mum was not easy because she's very Christian and very Nigerian. But I came out to her and I was like this, I was prepared to be disowned. She didn't understand it. She's like, I don't understand this gay thing. I don't get it. So you're a comedian and you're gay. So you're a gay clown. I don't get this.
A gay clown.
Yeah, I was like, I don't understand what is happening. So that means you're never getting married? No, you're never having kids. And I was like, look, I can still have kids, Mum. I can still have kids. I just don't want to do it with a man. And my mum was like, And that was kind of the end of it. She complained to my brother, all her feelings of, she poured them out on my brother, but we never really discussed it. I was like, well, she knows I'm gay. She has not disowned me. That is positive. And I'm not going to try and push my gayness in her face. She met some of my girlfriends, but she never really acknowledged them as my girlfriend. She's like, oh, that's your friend. Okay, your friend. Shut up. I don't want to know anymore. It's your friend. I don't care. I don't want to hear anymore. And it wasn't to my current girlfriend, Nina, who I've been with for 7 years. When Nina met her, Nina knelt before her, showing a show of respect Nina's white Jewish. But when Nina met her, she knelt before her and she'd obviously Googled how to show respect to Nigerian parents. And my mum fell in love with her immediately. And my mum get on like a house on fire. So my mum, even though, for Nigerian families and parents, it's not even really about how they feel. It's how they think other people think. It's all about how she looks in the community. What will her friends think that her daughter's a lesbian? So even though she loves me and loves Nina, she's like, okay, but stop talking about this in public. Just keep it between us. Why do you have to be so public about your lesbian? But she's actually been pretty accepting of me, and I'm happy with that.
When you eventually made it to New York, who were the comedians that you were coming up with in the clubs? Like, I know that you're very close with Tiffany Haddish. Yeah. Like, where did you meet her?
I met her in LA. So when I first came to America, I came to LA first. I was like, I want to do comedy in the sun. So I lived in Los Angeles for 7 years. I struggled to make money because there's no money in the comedy. And that's when after 7 years, I was like, I'm going to New York. Because every year I'd go to New York for 3-4 weeks. And I'd come back with more money in my hand than I'd earned in the entire year in Los Angeles. When I was in LA, I'd have to keep going back to England to do shows, going around the world to do shows, and then bringing the money back to LA to live off of. So I was like, well, I can't carry on like this. And so I moved to New York after 7 years, and I was there for 6 years and loved it. Had no plans of coming back to Los Angeles until I got the call from Chuck Lorre. But yeah, I when I came over, I did Last Comic Standing with Amy Schumer. I knew all the comics. I was working all the clubs. Will Savins, Patrice O'Neill, Ardy Fuqua. I worked with all of those comics. And, I got into the Cellar quite early and Gotham.
Yes.
The Gotham Comedy Club and the Comedy Cellar were two very supportive clubs of me. So I did a lot of
two
work
of the best. If anybody's coming to New York and wants to see comedy, and they're, fully open now, Comedy Cellar and Gotham, two of the best.
Yeah.
I know that you don't watch too much reality TV, but I wanted to just sort of float this topic by you. So this is, we do a lot of like Bravo and Housewives. You're familiar with the Housewives as a concept.
Absolutely. I used to watch the Atlanta Housewives, but I stopped watching it around Tardy to the Party, which is quite a long time ago.
Tardy for the Party, okay.
Yeah.
So as you know, as you're certainly well aware, historically, for the first 10, 12 years that the Housewives were on the air, they were racially segregated. You had Atlanta and Potomac, which were primarily the quote-unquote black cities with the black casts. And then you had everything else, the 5 other franchises, which were all white.
Yes.
And once... It was only last year, and it was actually before the Black Lives Matter, huge movement took place last summer, that Garcelle Bouvet was cast as the first black housewife of Beverly Hills.
Ridiculous, but okay. Ridiculous.
Speak to that.
I mean, why? Is it... Is it because they couldn't find a wealthy black woman, or they just weren't looking? They just weren't looking. You know, the epitome of Beverly Hills is white, blonde-haired, very plastic surgeryed up white women. And that is obviously what they were playing to, and they weren't even looking at black women. So they must have gone, oh, shit. In these times of racial awakening, we better get a black woman. So it feels kind of cynical, but I'm like, well, if it opens doors, I mean, if you really want to be on that kind of show, if it opens the doors and it shows that, you know, there are black women who also living that luxurious lifestyle, that we're not all just downtrodden and poor or pulling each other's weaves out in Atlanta.
I mean, perhaps even the better example is the New York franchise. Like, yes, although Los Angeles is incredibly racially diverse, but there's no more racially diverse melting pot on the planet than New York City. And I know that it wasn't that they weren't looking. They were looking for years, but there was never quite somebody who would agree to do it.
Right.
Quite frankly. And now they've cast another black woman on New York, and there's now an additional Asian woman, a Chinese woman on Beverly Hills. And
maybe I'll watch it now.
You should watch it. Yeah.
Because I used to watch the Atlanta one because I liked watching black wealthy women, you know? And for me, the Beverly Hills one did nothing for me. I was like, yeah, I've grown up watching these kind of people on TV, rich white people driving their Porsches and spending $1 million on a kitchen. So I just wasn't, it just didn't interest me in the same way. But if now I'm hearing that there's people of color on it, it might be worth getting back into the franchise.
Yes, yes, for sure. And also, I would say Potomac is a phenomenal franchise. You should absolutely watch the Potomac. It's better than Atlanta. Highly recommend. Really? Highly recommend for you.
All right. I'm going to start from the beginning with Potomac. Yes. Okay.
Now, you had mentioned, so still on this topic, so I think the audience, like the Bravo or the reality television audience, views these castings as, well, they're just very reactionary. Like, cast members were fired for like racial tweets, like all this sort of stuff. And the network had to really pivot. There was an entire New York Times article written about it, about how does...
We'll have to find that.
Absolutely find it.
Yeah.
And so my question is, yes, it's necessary and long overdue, but how do we also forgive and overlook the fact that for years and years, it was a certain way, and now it's suddenly a different way because of the social climate? Isn't it a bit... It's something. I don't really even have the word, but do you see it as a diversity hire?
I don't see it as a diversity hire. I see that we deserve to be there. And the fact that we weren't there before and now we are does not mean diversity hire. It means that they're moving with the times and realizing they were fucking up in the past. That's how I see it. You know, and if people are getting upset by that because, well, it's always been white, now they're bringing in a black person, then you're the problem.
Right.
You're the problem. Yeah. I don't see it as a diversity. I think it's, you know, whatever drags them to make those changes are necessary. The reasoning behind the changes, obviously not great, because they, you know, it wasn't until they're forced to reckon with themselves that they're making these changes. But at least these changes are happening, and I'm hoping it continues to happen. And eventually they'll just do it naturally without, trying to go, oh, we've got to get one black person in, otherwise we're going to get in trouble, you know, with the woke crew, you know, which is how they're thinking at this point.
Yeah. Gina, you're so great. I mean, like, what are you working on next? Like, when do you go back to work on the TV show? Like, what else?
In 2 weeks. I go back in 2 weeks to work on the show. So I start writing again in 2 weeks. So I've not had much of a break because I've had contractors in the house the whole time. So I don't feel like I've had any kind of hiatus. And then I'm on this book tour right now. So, you know, the book is coming out in a few days. I'm just hoping that it does well. I've already got ideas for the second book. And I'm hoping to turn the stories within the book into either a limited series or a movie or something.
Oh, I love that.
So that would be my next project, because I've had a very interesting life.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Talk about the title, cack-handed. I know it means left-handed, which you are, but you've talked about how you sort of have like multiple meanings around it.
Oh, yeah. So, cack-handed means left-handed. It also means awkward and clumsy. because left-handed people are perceived to be awkward and clumsy, which I don't think we are. I think we're living in a right-handed world. So everything, if I'm next to you at a bar and I'm talking and I'm gesticulating with my left hand, I'm going to knock over your drink because you put your drink on the right-hand side, which is your dominant side. But my dominant side is the left-hand side. And because 90% of the world is right-handed, we are the ones seen as clumsy and awkward. So cat-handed also means clumsy and awkward. Also, cat-handed also represents the unconventional route that my life and career has taken. It's never been a straight line. I've had to circumvent various obstacles that have been placed in my way. I've tried to make my own way. So yeah, there's a lot of different meanings to cat-handed.
I love it. Tell everyone where they can follow you on Instagram, if you have a YouTube channel, just everything so people can follow you.
I am very easy. I keep it very simple. It's at Gina Yashere everywhere. On Twitter, on Instagram. Instagram is my favorite social media. That's where I do the majority of my posts and work. And I do my tunes on Tuesdays and I do my hotel reviews, all that kind of stuff. So at Gina Yashere. If you just type at Gina Yashere, you will find my page. Or you can go to my website, which is ginayashere.com. And then you can umbrella off there to all my different pages. But yeah, please come to my website, join my mailing list so you get to know what I'm doing and buy my book and watch my show. God damn it.
You're hilarious.
My American accent is horrible.
You're hilarious. Thank you so much. This was great.
No, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye.
You too. See ya. Take care. When's this out, by the way, actually?
Oh, next week.
Next week. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Look forward to it.
Thank you.
All right.